Tonight on Garbage Time Fantasy Football, we have clowns and a fantasy football award show. It's time for Garbage Time. Guys, welcome into Garbage Time Fantasy Football tonight. It is me, Joe, and JJ running the show, and we have an award show for you. How are you doing tonight, JJ?
Good. Happy to finally have some time to podcast here and get back to the grind, even though it's like the end of the season. But, we'll still be putting stuff out.
Yeah, before we get into this, too, would you like to give the heckling fandom your glorious news that me and Ron announced on Monday?
Yeah, finally, after 2 years of wishing for it, Matt Nagy has been fired as the Bears head coach. He carried the offense to complete mediocrity and ruined fantasy relevant players. And very happy to see him hit the road. So very excited about the next new hire, hoping they get it right this time. Historically, they haven't, but, you never know. Sometimes you strike gold.
What names you monitoring for your head coaching search? And which ones do you think would be best for fantasy football?
I'm pretty open to it. Brian Daboll is obviously a name that stands out for what he was able to do with Josh Allen, letting him make that jump from year one to year two.
Yep.
So he's kind of exciting. Kellen Moore and Leftwich are a little raw, I think, for what the Bears need. We were talking about it a little before, but I think a more established coach wouldn't hurt. So Daboll has actually been around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm okay with that, but I'm actually pretty open to it. It's going to depend who the GM is too. A lot of good GM options.
How do you feel about the Packers OC?
Nah.
No one from across the pond?
No, I know he's got a couple interviews lined up, but I don't think he's the answer. I don't know a whole lot about Hackett, but I don't know. Their offense is very methodical and slow moving, and if they didn't have Aaron Rodgers, I don't know how successful it would be, and they don't run enough plays for me and for Fields. So,
all right. With that, let's get into the news and talk about some clowns not named Adam Gase.
News updates.
The clown is gone. Joe Judge has been fired from the Giants. What is this going to do for fantasy football? Relevant players like Saquon and Daniel Jones for the Giants going forward there, JJ. And what's your thoughts on the firing?
I think it was definitely the right move. The joke earlier today on Twitter was, how does Joe Judge keep his job when Brian Flores gets fired? So, yeah, I think that was the right move by the Giants. They're going to start fresh with a new GM and new coach.
Yep.
I think fantasy-wise, the report for like the last couple weeks of the season was that they're going to run it back with Daniel Jones and bring him back for another year. But I think this really opens the door to the possibility of them going a different direction at quarterback. So I think that should be pretty exciting for Giants fans. Most of the Giants fans I talked to, I haven't checked in with Ron lately, but aren't the biggest fan of Daniel Jones. So it'd be interesting. Maybe the Brian Daboll will end up going to the Giants and bring maybe Mitch Trubisky with him. You never know.
You never know. Obviously, the Giants are going to pay their bills and pick up someone. I think it's going to be a heavy bill. Unlike, podcast bills. I think they're honestly going to look for another offensive coach. I don't think it'll be someone like Hackett. There's obviously the other options. I think Kellen Moore might be a potential option. I think they want to bring in someone innovative. They're going to want to bring in some fresh minds. Daboll, as you mentioned, he's also in the mix for the Bears job. Probably going to be interviewed by the Vikings and every other team that needs a coach too. It'll be interesting to see what direction they go. They struggled on defense. I could really see them doing anything right now. There's no one that really sticks out to mind that, well, first off, would probably pick the Giants as their first wannabe job, even with 2 first-round picks. But yeah, this really opens up them to potentially getting a veteran quarterback in the offseason, because that earlier report of them running it back with Daniel Jones is probably from the old guard anyway. So, like you said, very interesting for fantasy football. Darren Waller was limited in practice today too. You're anticipating him playing in the playoffs this weekend?
I do think it's playoff time. This is where you see players whose injuries in the regular season may knock them out, but in the playoffs, they're going to take that extra pain medicine and they're going to get out there. Just like T.O. playing with his broken leg in the Super Bowl. It's just
insane.
Win or go home. So,
yep. And some more interesting coaching rumors. We already mentioned Kellen Moore. The Dolphins have requested permission to talk to him, but as I said, I'm expecting all of these circuits of guys to be interviewing 10 and 11 times at all of these spots. What direction the Dolphins going to go, you think? And is this good news for Tua? Should they pick him up?
If they pick up who?
Kellen Moore.
I don't know. There's been such heavy ties to Miami with Watson, but the report, one of the reasons why they said Brian Flores was fired was because he was pushing for Deshaun Watson and not developing Tua. So I'm not sure where ownership is with Tua, if they believe in him, but I mean, I definitely could see the right fit and Tua taking off. He really heated up towards the end of the season. His chemistry with Waddle is unquestionable. He loves Waddle. So I believe Devontae Parker's under contract again next year, so he's going to have weapons. So yeah, I mean, I think that duo could definitely work.
Okay. The Trey Sermon was activated by the 49ers. You see him getting any part of this offense this weekend against the Cowboys?
Probably not.
Okay, so no fantasy relevant for DFS this week then?
Probably. I mean, I can't trust him. I mean, he can qualify for some of these awards we're going to be talking about later.
He sure can. And Joe Burrow was a full participant, so there's absolutely no worry about him going to this weekend. Like you said, this is playoffs too, so it's win or go home. If they're even limited at all, just expect them to play. There's nothing to hold back for right now. You're playing for a Super Bowl.
Yes, sir.
Any other news you wanted to bring up before we get into a quick DFS lineup before we get into the awards?
I don't think there was anything else that I had. I think we pretty much covered it. You guys touched on most of the firings. So
yeah, all right. With that, let's get into the playoff DFS lineups of the week. So as stated, this is a fantasy football show, so we have to give you some fantasy football relevance. So I wanted to do playoff DFS lineups the next few weeks, just to kind of keep the theme of the show, obviously. JJ, do you have a lineup, or did you just want to go off of mine tonight?
I'm tinkering right now. I have one, but I'm tinkering. So why don't you start, and then I'll come through after.
Okay, as I alluded to in the description of the show, and guys, if you do like Garbage Time Fantasy Football and want to join the Heckling fandom, like and subscribe to the show. Obviously, you can watch and listen to us here on YouTube on your drive into work or wherever the hell you are. You can listen to us in podcast format too on Iheartradio, Google, Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, anywhere you listen to podcasts in general too. If you want to get a more synopsis idea of the show, www.garbagetimef.com, where you can leave us voicemails or hate mails, whatever you prefer, and scream at us on the show. Christian does it all the time, and we play them live on the show. And lately he's been screaming at JJ to get that top 10 horrible takes video out. So
it's coming, Christian.
He promises. So yeah, go ahead and do that on the website too. Like and subscribe to the show as we already stated, and stick with us all the way through the offseason. We've got some free agency coming up and some sabotage draft material coming up too. So with my first player in my DFS lineup for the week, I'm going with Mr. Playoff himself, Tom Brady, the 7,300. Listen, he's going up against the Eagles. There's a vendetta against the Eagles, and I believe he's going to want to torch them. So I'm going to start my DFS lineup this weekend. And mind you, this is an early one and can evolve throughout the week, but some of you can get some groundwork with at 7,300. Next, I'm going with one of the most expensive running backs for DFS this week, and I believe the most expensive for DraftKings of the week, Joe Mixon, at 6,800. I believe that in playoff football, you want to establish the run, and the Bengals haven't consistently been there for 20 years, I would think. So I think they're going to try to ease into this game. So I see Joe Mixon getting a good majority of this work, even with these explosive wide receivers. So I like his value at 6,800 because there's not a lot of expensive running backs too. Obviously, I'm going to have to differentiate my lineup a little bit later, which I did. Next, I went with Ramondre Stevenson because I've got a value somewhere. He didn't look bad coming off the injury last weekend too, and Harris was limited today, so that's kind of interesting too. He could get a lot of the work this week, and as I've said, Tom Brady actually would be his rookie. Mac Jones is going to look to probably throw to the running backs and establish good rhythm with them. The Eagles are good off the edges, so what works better than throwing a screen pass to Stevenson? So that's where we're going to go with that direction. Next, I went with Deebo Samuel at 8,100. I honestly believe that the 49ers are going to upset the Cowboys this week. And me and JJ off screen did talk about this. And we are going to have an apology bet for this. A straight up bet. We're not going to do it on the line. I think the 49ers can beat the Cowboys this week on the road. And the way they're going to go about doing that is I think getting Deebo Samuel established in the running game, believe it or not, this week, which he had done a large proportion of the season anyway. You'll see him in the passing work. You'll see him in the running game. They're going to look to keep the ball out of Dak Prescott's hands, but they have the weapons to hang with them, I believe. So I went with Deebo Samuel at 8,100 because he's going to be all over the place for fantasy football this week. Next, I went with wide receiver Devontae Smith at 5,500. I think there's a large chance that the Eagles could fall behind early against the Bucs in this game. So that'll set up the strategy where they're just going to have to throw the damn ball everywhere. So why not throw it to your rookie in the playoffs? Devontae Smith, 5,500. Next, I have to go a little bit cheaper to make this lineup actually fit. So I went with Mecole Hardman. I'm chasing the points here. He had a good game last week, so we'll see if that continues into this week. So Mecole Hardman going up against Pittsburgh at 4,100. Next, I'm going with tight end Pat Freiermuth at 4,200. There's honestly no reason I'm playing Pat Freiermuth. I just love his name. So Pat Freiermuth at 4,200. He's a good tight end. So, Big Ben will look for a security blanket, someone to throw it to. He's a favorite target there. Next, I went with Rob Gronkowski at 6,400. He is also Mr. Playoff with Tom Brady. He is basically a big-bodied wide receiver. He's a decent value. I don't have to spend nearly as much on him as some other wide receivers here. So this helps me get within the budget. I am going to play 2 tight ends for DFS this week. So Rob Gronkowski at 6,400, who could potentially be the number 1 option for Tom Brady this week. And my defense to round it out is the 49ers because, honestly, I think they're going to get up for this game. They played all right against the Rams. It was a high-scoring game, but they've got good pieces on that defense. And the Cowboys just have this propensity to choke in the playoffs, so I'm going to stick to that, and that's what they're going to do. When you get to the playoffs, it's good defenses and good offenses. You're not going to be getting lineups like anyone against Detroit. So you're going to have to pick your places. I'm going with the 49ers defense. Thoughts?
I like it. I kind of like what you said about Mr. Playoff. Like a lot of guys, when they get to the playoffs, it's like something extra just clicks with them, and they just take it to the next level. So there's some exciting young new players that are in the playoffs for the first time. So it'd be cool to see if they live up to the hype and their potential. But
alluding to that, my guess is Joe Burrow's in your lineup, but we'll see.
Maybe, but yeah, you and I, we did talk about it. We are on different wavelengths for the Cowboys and 49ers game. So
I think you have a button to hit then, right?
Oh, I forgot about that. Let me find.
Yeah, we actually have drops with this kind of shit.
I'm rusty, man. I haven't been to the playoffs in a while. My team never makes it.
Not like mine. My hope is that I will not be doing 2 apologies over the next 2 weeks because Ron's currently writing me one too. So that fucking sucks.
He's writing me one too. I'm not gonna hold my breath though, so probably won't even have to do it.
We will see. All right, go ahead with your lineup.
So yeah, you caught me red-handed. Quarterback Joe Burrow. I just think he is the hottest quarterback in the last few weeks. Well, he sat out last week, but until last week, he had thrown for like 800 yards and 8 or 9 touchdowns. Was red hot, and he has this chemistry with Jamar Chase down pat right now. So I have Burrow at home versus Vegas. Running back, I have Zeke. I think it's playoff time. Football gets a little more physical.
It does.
I think they're going to try and lean on Zeke early, at least for sure. Try and establish a run and control the time possession. I think the Cowboys have a respectable line. Obviously, they have the number one offense in the league. So I think that Zeke can get rolling in the playoffs here.
Till this week.
My second running back is hopefully he comes back. This is obviously subject to change, but I have Leonard Fournette in there. He's one of the hottest running backs in fantasy this year, especially with as much as Tom Brady relied on him as a pass catcher, and with Godwin obviously out and Antonio Brown doing God knows what. They're down pass catchers. So I think if Fournette does in fact come back like many are anticipating, he could have himself a good game versus the Eagles that can be had by the run.
Yep.
First wide receiver, I talked about it's Jamar Chase. Stacked him with Burrow. I just think these guys, I mean, either they're going to have a good game and the Bengals will win the game, or we'll get shell-shocked to be down early and have to catch up. So either way, I like the outlook. Zach Taylor has shown that he'll throw throughout the game, regardless of what's going on. So I just trust that duo. Second wide receiver, Gabriel Davis. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to check the weather because the game is in Buffalo. At last I checked, it was just supposed to be cold. But another young player, first time in the playoffs. I really like his talent and just think he's going to make plays on the big stage. So
all right,
I went with Gabriel Davis. Next wide receiver, this is a bring back for the Bengals. I went with Hunter Renfrow. He's obviously been the most reliable target for Derek Carr. Second half of the season, had himself a great year. And in the playoffs, you lean on your playmakers and the guys that got you there. So Waller's obviously banged up, and I think he will play like we talked about earlier, but Renfrow has been the true security blanket with Waller being hurt all year. Tight end, you nailed it, I think. Gronk. I talked about the lack of pass catchers Brady has these days, so he's going to rely on his boy Gronk in the playoffs. Eagles are 31st in fantasy points against tight ends, so that's definitely a weakness for them, and I think he can definitely take advantage. I'm trying to remember what he did the last time they played the Eagles. Did he play in that game, or was that when he was still out? I think he was still out in that. Okay.
Yeah, I don't believe he played in that game.
Yeah, he was still out. Right. So again, that's an unscattered look. So
this playoffs is not going to matter. He's going to be heavily targeted.
Yep. My flex, I have Hunter Henry in there right now, and really that was a result of a low cap space. So
tight ends like me.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about it. I'm going to tinker a little bit more. I'm not that sold on Davis and Zeke, so I could play with that, but for now we're going to keep it. And then defense, I went the opposite of you. I went with Dallas at home. I've got Diggs and Micah Parsons playing out of their minds. They're at home. Jimmy G hasn't been that great lately. I think that's who they're going to go with. He's been banged up, and Dallas has been a very opportunistic defense. So I think they score some sacks and turnovers and win at home by double digits. So
that's interesting, but I think the difference maker in that game will be Debo. I like that you're chasing the 110 points that Chase and his quarterback gave us last week. Well, actually, wasn't last week.
Week 17. Before.
Yeah, that was week 17. But I mean, it's prolific, and if they hit, obviously it's going to go good. I feel like that's going to be a heavy stack this week, though, too. That's why I differentiated, but it could be an effective stack. Gabriel Davis is an interesting shoot of the dart, too. He's not going to be in a lot of lineups, I think, but he's heavily talented, and players emerge in the playoffs. Renfrow, I'm a little bit skeptical of, just for the reason that Waller is back, and statistically, as we've seen, and we've all pointed out on this podcast, when for some reason Waller is in the lineup, he drops, and he did in the last game down to 12 points. But Waller's banged up, so maybe it won't go that way. He's obviously been the most consistent. And where do you go in the playoffs? It's consistency. Overall, I like your lineup, though. And I think Zeke is a good play.
Hopefully the Cowboys win.
Yeah, I don't think so. All right, I think with that, we're ready to get into the award portion of the show, right?
Absolutely.
So, guys, we recapped the season a little bit last episode, but we don't want to bore you going week to week to week and going to every single player. So we're going to do this in pieces throughout the offseason too. And what we wanted to do is have a little bit of fun with this. So we decided to do a little bit of an award show. I've got 11 categories here where me and JJ will go back and forth and name our players here. We got some fun ones too, where we're going to shit on some of these players too. So let's get the first one out of the way, obviously. Who is your fantasy MVP?
There's two options here. One I could rub in your face, but I won't. My fantasy MVP is Cooper Kupp, just because where he was drafted. I mean, he came up draft boards like later on because of the talk of him having breakfast with Stafford and the chemistry in camp. But he was still a 4th or 5th round pick typically. So sometimes some drafts even later. So for what you got for that, pretty much every team in every league that had Cooper Kupp, every league that I was in had Cooper Kupp was in the playoffs because he had a monster year. He won the Triple Crown in receiving, led in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. So crazy season.
Out of nowhere. My fantasy MVP, I went the same direction you did. I went with Cooper Kupp. So if you take Fantasy Pros stats, he had 294.5 points on average in most leagues. The next closest wasn't even 30 points closer, and that was Deebo Samuel. So he absolutely dominated at the wide receiver position. And it honestly came out of nowhere. That makes you a fantasy MVP. And I completely agree with you here. And yes, you could shove Jonathan Taylor in my face. He had a fantastic season, but I think Cooper Kupp is the correct decision for fantasy MVP this year. So for next category, we have most valuable rookie. Is there any question to who this is?
I think it's unanimously Jamar Chase.
Yeah, I mean, Jamar Chase, 60-point performance, and he had a few other great performances too. How the hell can you go against him? I mean, up until that point, you could have argued, I think Waddle maybe was giving him a little bit of a chase at the end of the season too. But no, it's Jamar Chase. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Is anyone even in the running for it?
No, I'm Najee Harris, I guess. I'd be interested to see the point total. But he's the only other one you can mention. Definitely no quarterbacks.
Okay. So with that, let's move on to our next category. We're going to get over the obvious here. Next, we're going to go with one there might be a little bit of disagreement on, maybe not. Fantasy Comeback Player of the Year. Who do you have in this category?
I have Deebo.
Okay, how come?
Well, last year he was hurt pretty much the whole year. This year he was incredibly low on draft boards because of his health, and people were skeptical of him. And then he came back and dominated and had a monster year and made a lot of fantasy owners happy. So I went with Deebo. Who would you go with? You looked a little surprised by that.
I went with Dak Prescott for the reason he had an awful injury, and we didn't know what he was going to do coming back, and he completely finished as a QB1 this year. He was fantastic. He looks like he was never injured to begin with, spreading the ball around good, making good decisions, and just a solid all-around quarterback for fantasy football. And he's going to be in that top 5 range next year too. He's just had a fantastic year and coming off what could have been another quarterback's career back in the 90s is just incredible. So I went with Dak Prescott for Comeback Fantasy Player of the Year. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think he is definitely going to win NFL Comeback Player of the Year. I mean, everyone remembers that injury, that gruesome injury, and him on the cart shedding tears. And then the way he came back was, especially week 1, that was a hell of a game versus the Buccaneers, and everyone was kind of shocked how well he played. So I definitely agree. He had some down weeks. And I think you said Deebo was a wide receiver too. I think Dak was was he a top 5 QB? I should have it written down, but
depending on the format.
Yeah. So they're close. I definitely see the arguments for both guys.
You could probably throw Joe Burrow into this argument too, but Joe Burrow was a little bit more inconsistent too. Definitely helped you win your league if you played him the last few weeks.
Yep.
But I think in consistency, Dak was probably better throughout the year. But it'll be interesting to see where these two players are ranking next season. Who do you think ranks higher?
I think Burrow will rank. I think they'll be like right next to each other, but I think Burrow will have a slight edge.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I don't know. Both have such good weapons.
Maybe this will make it into the bad takes video next year too.
Maybe.
We'll see what we say about this kind of stuff in the offseason.
Yeah. I'm sure they're going to be ranked really close. I just think Burrow will probably rank a touch higher.
Yeah.
What about you?
My gut's telling me that Dak will be a little bit higher. At least personally, I'm going to pick Dak just for the running upside. I always like to go with the quarterback that's got a. I like a prolific passer, obviously, but I like a little bit of running upside too. I'm not saying I need a Lamar Jackson. I'm not that kind of a guy, but I like someone that's got a little bit of running upside. Dak's obviously got that. The Russell Wilson kind too. I just like those kind of quarterbacks. Kyler Murray is the guy I picked this year. I don't think I'll be picking him next year because I'm getting sick of him getting hurt the second half of the season. We'll see what he does in the playoffs and see if I reevaluate that. I'm sure I'll come to love him again in the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next category, we have League Winning Award. So these are the guys that helped you win your league. You can interpret this any way you want. Who did you pick for this award, JJ?
For this one, I went with James Conner.
That's a good pick.
If you had James Conner, you took him later on, and you probably had some form of injury and had problems with your roster. And he just kind of stepped in once Chase Edmonds got hurt and was just a touchdown machine. And powered a lot of teams into the playoffs, I know. One of the things that pissed me off the most about our winner league in the auction draft, I was out of money because your buddy Sylvester bid me up on every single player I put out there.
He wanted all your players.
So I was, a lot of good it did.
Yeah, right.
For both of us. I only had $1 left, and I was waiting because I wanted James Conner for $1, and certain someone that was in the championship. No, TJ didn't win the championship.
No,
he lost round 4. But yes, James Conner, he stole him from me for $2, and he wound up in the game before the championship. So
what a prick!
What a prick!
All right. So yeah, I think that's a good one too. And obviously he was very consistent towards the end of the year, especially when that injury to Edmonds happened. And that's where they really saw him in bell cow status. And that continued after too. When I look at the league winning award, I went with someone that you could have potentially picked up late and helped you win at the end. So I went with Amon-Ra St. Brown because over the last, I believe, 6 weeks, he had 560 yards and 6 touchdowns. And he was on a lot of winning rosters for that reason too. I think he's going to be seen as a wide receiver too going into next season. He's explosive. And when the injuries occurred to the top running back and tight end on the Lions, he took over that role and he ran away with it. So obviously, like I said, on many winning rosters, Amon-Ra St. Brown won you championships.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick. Like the whole second half of the year, he was red hot, and every week I would be on DFS and he'd be in that same price range between like 5,000 and 6,000. I'm like, there's no way he's going to do it again. There's no way he's going to have 100 yards and score. And sure enough, he does it over and over again.
He's a big he's a big reason why I was able to get out of the basement in DFS and go from 4th to 2nd place by the end, because I was doing pretty bad the first 8 weeks.
Yeah, and one of the storylines I'm going to follow closest in the offseason is the Lions quarterback situation. If they're going to run it back with Goff or if they're going to try and go in a different direction. My gut tells me they'll draft a quarterback in maybe like the 2nd or 3rd round and let Goff start the year off. But obviously Goff had that chemistry with St. Brown, and that was his Cooper Kupp. Him and Kupp had chemistry when he was in LA, and it seems like St. Brown is his guy in Detroit. So if he is a starter next year, I definitely will be ranking St. Brown higher.
Interestingly enough, too, I put him on our trade block in the Dynasty League. I don't know if anyone's going to be able to rip him away, but just figured to see what I can get for him.
I'll tell you what, Ron needs to activate his bots in the Dynasty League because I
So
have
they start
multiple
making some
trades on
trades.
there and nobody is responding to them, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah, they need to start looking at the Dynasty League. All right, so our next category here is best fantasy value. This can be in any category that you see, whether it be waivers, draft. Who is your best value this year for fantasy football?
I kind of touched on Debo already, so I don't want to be boring. So I'll go with someone else. I'll go with Jalen Hurts here.
Mm-hmm.
If you waited on quarterback this year, he was a prime target. He was around that 10th, 11th quarterback taken in a lot of drafts. And he really panned out. He finished, I believe, as like a top 5 quarterback. Though he devastated me in the championship week 17, so I am a little mad at him for that. But he was pretty consistent all year with his floor, with his rushing ability. Nick Sirianni is an asshole who likes to let Boston Scott run in touchdowns for some goddamn reason. But anyways, I liked what Jalen Hurts did a lot this year. So I thought he was a great value for, waiting on quarterback. There were a lot of, and I'm rambling now, but there were a lot of quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Kyler, Lamar, Mahomes. It seemed like this year, those 4 were getting taken pretty early in drafts.
They were.
So if you were one of the ones that waited on quarterback, Hurts really helped you out a lot.
2 questions, JJ. Is Jalen Hurts a good passing quarterback?
Good enough. He did a good job this year with the Eagles. He got him to the playoffs. And as the year went on, he really took strides. He made some great throws throughout the season. I think he really has potential, and I think that's his job next year, especially with the very weak draft class coming in.
Agreed.
So I think he will be their starter again next year.
And question number 2, was that championship game the Toilet Bowl championship in winner?
No. That championship was in my dad's 16-man league, and I had Jalen Hurts, and my opponent had Joe Burrow, so I stood no chance.
Yeah, no, I'm sure got decimated in that lineup.
I did.
I am so sorry. You can't win them all, though. And in some leagues, you get last place.
Don't get me started, Joe.
All right, my best fantasy value of this year was Tom Brady. Listen, he is just the heir of consistency. And for some stupid reason, he went in the 6th or 7th round this year. He probably will again next year. And he finished as a top 3 fantasy football quarterback this year. He's going to again next year. They're going to run it back because he's an asshole, drinks his smoothies, and never retires. So Tom Brady is my fantasy value of the year.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, but some asshole in the preseason projected that he doesn't duplicate what he did last year, and he decides to lead the league in passing yards and passing touchdowns. So maybe that'll make an appearance on the Cold Takes episode. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how that works out.
But obviously that's a tremendous value. He fell behind those 4 or 5 guys I mentioned earlier, and was just dominant week in and week out. So, damn you, Brady. All I ask Brady is that you knock Aaron Rodgers out of the playoffs.
Oh, that's funny as shit. All right, so next award I'm going to go to is the midseason savior. Who is your midseason savior of fantasy football?
We kind of touched on him a little bit.
There's no reason you can't hand out 2 awards to the same person.
I would say Amon-Ra St. Brown, really, this is just the perfect award for him. Week, 8, 9, 10, we were talking about him in the waiver wire, and we just talked about what he did. He was just cranking out 100-yard games with massive receptions and big plays and touchdowns. He really had a good year. So I would say Amon-Ra St. Brown.
So my midseason savior is someone who I initially picked for league MVP, but he really picked it up after the second half. It was Justin Herbert, who led all fantasy quarterbacks with the best average. After it was 24.2 fantasy points a game. That was the last 10 games. So I think that's a good mark for midseason savior. Probably won some leagues too. He played good in the last week too. If you were playing in the disgusting week 18 matchups, which nobody should be doing in, and I always say you should finish your leagues a week beforehand. I think another good option for this was Mark Andrews too, who absolutely exploded in the second half too. So he's another option here for midseason savior. But I went with Justin Herbert as my midseason savior.
Both really good choices.
Yep. All right, so let's start getting into some of these fun ones too. Fantasy football. No, actually, we'll do this one first. The Never Consistent Award. Who is your fantasy football never consistent award?
I feel like I know who you probably picked, and he is in Seattle.
We'll
Am I right?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. Well, I'll do it. I mean, he should win this award every year. Tyler Lockett, once again.
Never consistent.
People drafted him high, which his numbers at the end of the year always work out to where he should be rated there. But he hit a cold stretch down the heart of the season when the games mattered most.
Mm-hmm.
That was not good. And Tyler Lockett had like 3 monster games once again, and the rest was completely pedestrian. Even though he had a career high in receiving yards, he actually started off the year mildly consistent. He went back to his old ways when it counted most. So I got to go with Tyler Lockett.
The award's made for him, right? But, you have to hand that trophy off to someone, right? So I went with Mr. Inconsistent on my team, which this man went from healthy scratch to 100-yard games towards the second half of the season. I went with Brandon Ayuk here because he was such a dick. I trusted him, and I'm like, he'll pick it up at some point. I know he will. He hung on my roster for about 11 weeks, and then he hit a few good games. I'm like, all right, we're back here. He looks like a wide receiver too, and then a few duds, and then the last few weeks, good games again. So what the fuck, Brandon Ayuk? Mr. Inconsistent.
Man, that's a good one. I agree. Those San Francisco pass catchers, you never know what you're going to get. Another one you could say is George Kittle. He was terrible. And then
anyone on the Shanahan team?
He had those monster weeks, and then he just died. He just did nothing the last quarter of the season.
Makes you really hedge when betting on them next year in auction league.
It's going to be interesting to see where he ranks.
Won't be $26, that's for sure. Nope. All right, next, who is your waiver wire warrior of fantasy football this year?
I went with Cordero Patterson.
That's a good one.
Just because guys like Connor and some of the other ones I think were drafted, he was not drafted anywhere. No one thought he was going to do anything. Everyone was talking about Mike Davis, who one of the takes I'm proud of in the preseason was completely fading Mike Davis, not drafting him in a single league because I knew he could not hold that job. But Cordero Patterson came out and had a monster season and was pretty much snubbed from the Pro Bowl. So, I'm going to go with Patterson. He saved a lot of people's teams who had early year injuries. So
that's interesting. So I went with I also went with a running back. It wasn't Cordero Patterson, but I went with someone that also could have helped you win your championship too. He had a few good weeks at the end there. It was Eli Mitchell, and he helped teams. If you were hurting at the running back position, you picked them up in week 2 or 3. 963 yards, 4.7 yards a carry, and 5 touchdowns over that last little bit of stretch too. And he even got into the receiving game, 137 yards and a touchdown. If you were hurting at the position and you spent all your fab on him, he worked out for you very well. He was a true running back too for your team. And lots of teams that picked him up were hurting at the position. So I went with Eli Mitchell for the waiver wire warrior.
Yep. Another great pick. Everyone thought it was going to be Trey Sermon, and he was drafted. Myself included. I was in that club for sure.
I spent some money on him and then promptly dropped him.
They picked Sermon so much higher than Mitchell, so it was very surprising for a lot of people. But I'm happy I have Mitchell in Dynasty League. I'm hoping they don't add too many running backs to that running back room in San Francisco.
They probably will, because that's what they do. Jeff Wilson will come back healthy, and they'll run it back with their little track star there too.
Yeah, who knows?
All right. Next, we'll do the Fantasy Football Bust Award. Who is your Fantasy Football Bust of the Year?
This one's a little personal for me.
I think I'm going to like this one.
I'm going with Allen Robinson, who not only let down his fantasy owners, who typically took him in the top 30, top 35, let down Bears fans with his disgusting shit effort that he gave the entire season, running routes at half speed, milking injuries, not blocking for runners. It was just a terrible season that he just rode out to try and get his next contract. So I would like to formally say, fuck you, Allen Robinson. Good riddance.
The Russian bots in our comments agree with you too.
Well, it was just seriously like the most pathetic thing I've ever seen in my life. And he did not embrace Justin Fields at all. He didn't do anything extra with Fields. He just collected his paycheck, and now his ass is out of town.
Would you be absolutely flaming if they brought him back?
Yes. I would go on a serious rant, worse than the one I just went on.
Oh my God, I'd love to see it. So my Fantasy Football Bust Award is going to a running back that went first in a lot of leagues, was thought to come back and be a beast. Our other, we'll call him a host, I guess, tonight, Ron Seymour, spent a shitload of money on him, and all he did was spend the entire year getting hurt. Christian McCaffrey. I mean, what the fuck can we say about this guy? The last few years, he's been banged up. It sucks because when he's out there, even banged up, he's good, but he just can't stay on the field, and it's irritating as hell because it's not season-ending injuries. It's just injuries that have nagged. So when are we going to get this guy back healthy? Christian McCaffrey, without a doubt, is a huge disappointment, and is my bust for fantasy football.
Yeah, I don't know. In mock drafts next year, he's going to go in the top 3 in every mock draft you do.
Yep.
It's just, like you said, it's frustrating. Everyone's just waiting for him to stay healthy. So he's been taking a lot of heat, too, from Panthers media and in interviews he's been in. They've really been questioning his ability to stay healthy and if he's frustrated by not being able to play. And he's kind of brushed it off and says he's not concerned about it. So he's going to have to prove it next year. He got that monster contract, and since that, he has been very disappointing for both the Panthers and fantasy owners without his availability.
Agreed. And the reason why Saquon Barkley didn't get this spot is for 3 reasons. 1, he was coming off an injury, and a lot of people were expecting this. 2, you didn't draft him number 1 overall. A lot of people were picking him anywhere from 10 to the second round. And 3, Joe Judge was his fucking coach. Look for him to get healthy and be a lot better next year. I think he's going to have a much better outlook. All right, JJ, moving on to this. Who is the Get Off My Roster award go to for you?
I'd like to give this to Allen Robinson again.
Is that the direction you're going? Is there anyone you cut mid-season that you just infuriated you?
He's one of them.
He's going to get 2 awards tonight.
Yeah, I'm giving it to him again. I hate that guy.
I find
the worst part is that I traded Alvin Kamara for him, and it pisses me off so much when I think about it because I should have seen it earlier.
You know,
I already didn't like him. I just thought I thought he would be excited about Fields playing, and he just didn't give a shit.
He literally didn't give a shit. It's so funny that you go on a 5-minute rant for this guy, Allen Robinson, because I made a point of writing a whole rant for the Get This Man Off My Roster award. And funny enough, that was Allen Robinson, and I was going to bring up the point that you traded Alvin Kamara to me for him. But I also got an awful stat for you that is just going to infuriate you more. In a lot of games, he scored less than 5.2 fantasy points, and that was 4 times. And he never scored over 11 points in fantasy football the entire season. That's not even wide receiver 4 good. It's completely fantasy irrelevant. No, it's not 5. It's completely fantasy irrelevant. It's not even almost worth a roster spot. And he was cut by many people. Just an absolutely pathetic performance by him this year. I don't know. It's because if he just wanted to get out of town, if he hated the coaching staff, if the coaching staff didn't use him well. I think he just didn't show any effort there. He just wanted to be gone.
Yep, 100%. And what was I going to say? I don't know. I lost it. But
I don't know.
I was going to say that Jamar Chase game, Week 17, his numbers in that game were almost equivalent to Allen Robinson's season-long numbers. That's insane.
Who would have thought it? Where's that asshole end up next season? Please don't say the Jets.
He wants to go to in that podcast with Richard Sherman and Collinsworth. He said he liked the idea of playing in New York, and that's where he trains too. The main place he trains is in New York.
Please no.
So
we need a wide receiver, but there's better options. Christian Kirk, Mike Williams are out there. Those are guys I'd rather have. I don't want to go the Allen Robinson route. He's been consistent over the years, but once you lose that effort, I'm afraid at any point you'll just give up too if it doesn't work out, because obviously he's willing to give up. All right, and the last award we are saving here, this is a consistent and one true for my heart. Who is getting your Adam Gase Fantasy Clown Award of the year? Anyone associated with football, anyone that affected fantasy football.
Well, the obvious pick for me, but
Ron Seymour.
Why don't you go first with yours? I got to decide between two guys.
Okay, so my Adam Gase Fantasy Clown Award Player of the Year is Antonio Brown. So listen to this. You fake a vaccine pass. You don't pay your cook, who also rats you out. You get hurt and are only productive in 3 games for the fucking year. You take off your clothes in the middle of the field and you quit, and only after sneaking an OnlyFans girl into your hotel room the night before. And then you shit on Tom Brady on your way out of town, which isn't going to help, obviously, you ever get a job again. And then in the process of doing this, you release a new track all within a week. So Antonio Brown, you were a complete clown and you were done in the NFL. So you get the Adam Gase Fantasy Football Clown Award of the Year.
That was very good. It's a good option. I know you were very high on Antonio Brown with good reason. Obviously, he's still a talented player, and it's a shame that he's decided to go the route he has. But
I'm sure CTE has something to do with it, but I don't think that's got everything to do with it. He's got some character issues, and it has shown over the years. How the hell Mike Tomlin kept that together for 9 years, I will never know.
I saw he was hanging out with Kanye West yesterday, so I'm sure that's
a great influence.
Even crazier than Antonio Brown, so that's quite the duo. So yeah,
future president, vice president combo running there.
God, yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah.
My clown award, it's kind of just to a theme, if that makes any sense. But
this is your award; you can do whatever you want with it.
My clown award goes to Kevin Stefanski, Nick Sirianni, these coaches that on the goal line refuse to use fantasy relevant players and run in Boston Scott. They don't give Nick Chubb goal line carries. I can't draft Nick Chubb next year. I love the player. I love the talent. Kevin Stefanski, you're a fucking moron. And everyone, media, announcers, people on Twitter, everyone can see that Nick Chubb's the best running back that you have. And you consistently take him out and don't use him. Peyton Manning grilled you on Monday Night Football and said, Nick Chubb isn't in the game. Nothing good happens. I don't understand these coaches. They make it way harder than it needs to be. Another final clown shout out to fucking Matt Nagy in his last goddamn game. Where on 4 occasions, he had a 4th and 1 situation. The one time he runs David Montgomery, he gets a first down. So what does he do for the other 3 4th and 1s? He passes with Andy Dalton. The results, 2 sacks. Change of possession. The 3rd time he does it, he throws a pick 6. Goodbye to both of them.
The clown award sounds like good fantasy therapy, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I think everyone should try it.
I really just talking about stupid coaches that fuck up fantasy football.
Maybe we should name the award after him next year. It'll go from Adam Gase to the Matt Nagy Award.
That.
The Nagy Award.
The Nagy.
Yeah, the Nagy. Who's going to get the Nagy next year? Adam Gase, you were relieved of your clown duties. There's a new ringleader here. His name
I wonder if Adam's going to get back on the coaching ring this year.
Oh, God. What, as an offensive coordinator? Or as your next head coach?
I'm sure he wouldn't. I'm sure no one would bring him in as a OC. He would probably be a position coach somewhere.
I'm just warning you, Polian was on our roster when they suggested Adam Gase for the head coaching job. And, we hired him. So don't count all your chickens before they hatch. He was your coordinator, too, and is familiar with that town. Would it be out of the realm of possibilities that the Bears would do some bullshit like that?
If the Bears hired Adam Gase, Bears fans would burn down the entire city. They're already so pissed off from the postseason press conference. If they did something like that, it would just – I can't imagine.
You haven't gotten that off your chest, too, on Garbage Time Fantasy Football, and this is a therapy session. Go into that, too, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah. Okay. The Bears had their end-of-season press conference. It's the only time in the year that the ownership of the Bears talks. The ownership is the McCaskies, who is the Virginia McCaskies, the daughter of George Halas, founder of the Bears. Yep. Her son is the chairman, and he makes all the decisions on hiring coaches and GMs for whatever reason. And even during his press conference, he said, "I'm not a football mind. I'm just a football fan." And this is the guy picking football positions. So he consistently does it. He's been through 3 GMs and 4 head coaches in 10 years. So it just continues to fail over and over again. Since he's taken over, they have been in the playoffs twice with no playoff wins and a ton of losing seasons, nothing good. So it's just seems like it's going to be more of the same, but hoping that Bill Polian, the old dinosaur, pulls a trick out of his hat and makes some quality hires, because I do like some of the interviews that they've had going for their GM and head coach.
And that right there, folks, is how you end up with Joe Judge being the next head coach of the Chicago Bears. God. With that thought, let's go in. Have a good night, guys. Join the Heckling fandom.